Hi there. In this topic video, we're going to focus in particular on the economics of youth unemployment. So youth unemployment is a major problem in many countries, including the UK. This chart shows the rate of youth unemployment since 2000. The data is expressed as a percentage of the labour force aged between 18 to 24 years old. You can see that having been fairly stable at around 10 to 12% from 2000 to 2007, the rate of youth unemployment climbed sharply in the recession year 2009 and then continued to rise to nearly 20% by 2012. Youth unemployment at this point was a major political issue and to an extent still is, even though the rate of youth unemployment has fallen to about 13.3% in 2015. Keep in mind that unemployment in the UK at present is about 5% of the labour force, so youth unemployment is nearly 3 times as high. Another way of looking at youth unemployment is to express the data by gender. This shows the level of unemployment amongst men and women aged between 18 and 24. And you can see that in July of 2015, there were about 320,000 young men unemployed and 225,000 young women. Another big issue on youth unemployment is the idea of the NEETs. This is a group of particularly disadvantaged young people in the labour market. NEETs are people who are not in education, not in employment, or not in full-time training. And you can see that although there has been some progress in reducing the number of people who are categorised as NEETs, the figure has only fallen very slowly from over 1 million in the spring of 2013 to still over 900,000 in the spring of 2015. So NEETs are people who are not in work, not in education, not in training. And there's nearly 1 million of these people estimated in the UK. Of course, youth unemployment is a huge problem in many European countries. The average youth unemployment rate in Europe is just over 20%. But in countries such as Greece and, as we see here in Spain, the youth unemployment rate is well over 50%. Indeed, in 2015 it was 58% in Spain. And many of these young workers have been out of work for at least a year and often longer. So this is an incredibly important issue to think about when you're writing and assessing and evaluating unemployment. So in the UK, the most recent figures is that from the 3 months from December 2015 to February 2016, there were just over 625,000 young people in this country unemployed. And that is down over 100,000 on the previous year, so some progress is being made, which is good news, but it remains a high level, 13.7% unemployment amongst young workers 16 to 24-year-olds in February 2016. Now, clearly one has to think about the causation here. What are the main causes of high youth unemployment? And the truth and the reality is that there are many separate causes. Some of the youth unemployment details are the result of labour market failures, others the result of macroeconomic difficulties. Here are 4 possible explanations for high rates of youth unemployment. One is simply that employers are reluctant to employ young people who seem to lack, in some cases, basic functional literacy, numeracy and writing skills, and other soft social skills as well. Many young people leave school without 5 A to C grades in GCSE, including English and maths. So there are some structural skills gaps that need to be addressed. Often reluctant employers in terms of taking on inexperienced workers. There may be a choice between perhaps somebody who's had 3 or 4 years in the labour market and has built up a track record on a CV, and they may appear more productive, more viable than somebody who's yet to get their first job or who's been out of work for some time, perhaps never even had a proper full-time job. Another aspect in recent times has been that the retirement age has been going up, but also a lot of people who've taken early retirement and perhaps could have opened doors for young people to take their jobs have come back into the labour market. There's been a fall in interest rates and a fall in pension annuities, and a lot of older people have had to carry on working to pay the bills and to pay off their mortgages. So that natural demographic change, whereby older people retire and free up space in the labour market for younger people, hasn't been working as effectively. there's been increased competition for jobs, particularly from those older workers, and also from the inflow of migrant workers. So in the UK, there's been net inward migration in excess of 200,000 in each of the last 5 or 6 years. So clearly there are more people competing for work, and young people may find themselves outcompeted in an increasingly competitive labour market. Now, high unemployment amongst young people undoubtedly has economic and social consequences. There's a cost to the government, both in terms of lost tax revenues and also the fact that they may have to pay more in welfare. Young people typically have quite a high marginal propensity to spend, but of course if they're out of work, their disposable income is affected, and that can lead to a fall in aggregate demand more generally in the economy. A significant long-term effect of young people who don't get a job and who effectively are outside the labour market is that inactivity over 1 or more years can have a huge effect on their expected employment opportunities and their expected lifetime income. And young people, if they don't have access to a job and a regular income, may find themselves disadvantaged in the financial markets. If they go and try to borrow money, for example, they may find it particularly hard and might be charged, for example, penal interest rates by the payday lenders. A wider issue is that if employment opportunities amongst young people are particularly poor, one is likely to see, as we are experiencing in countries such as Spain and Portugal and Greece, a lot of younger people deciding that their fortune and favour is best by moving outside the country. So there's a possibility of a significant brain drain effect as younger workers leave a country in search of work. That of course has negative consequences for the country's labour supply and potential production. So what can we do to try to reduce youth unemployment? Well, governments of course have been addressing this issue for many years, and youth unemployment rates in the UK have been falling, but we're still left with 13% youth unemployment 7 years after the last recession. So that suggests that youth unemployment, getting it below 10%, will be a really tough challenge. So what are the options? Well, there are many, and of course it's up to you to evaluate which are likely to be most effective and which might be have most impact in terms of value for money per pound spent. A lot of people think that there should be a rapid expansion of mentoring programs, establishing closer links between schools, colleges and employers, and giving students in particular more options beyond GCSE and beyond A-level. In other words, some alternatives to going to university. A growing number of employers are now taking on 18-year-olds ahead of university because they want to train them up themselves. There's been a big expansion of certified apprenticeship schemes. The big question is who should fund that? Should it be the government, or should the private sector take more of the heavy lifting in terms of financing good apprenticeship schemes? A lot of people think that there should be better career education in schools. In many schools, careers education is piecemeal at best. And one tax option is for the government to cut the national insurance contributions that employers pay, for example, if they take on a long-term unemployed young worker. The idea there is to bring down the marginal cost to a business of taking on a young person. There's calls for increased funding for education more generally, and in particular to give more weighting and more funding to vocational courses, to STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering and maths, and also to expand coding to increase employment opportunities in the creative industries. Long term, we need to lift the basic skills of our younger workers, particularly functional numeracy and literacy. And there's also calls for increased funding, increased access to bursaries for university tuition. A couple of other key points that are worth mentioning. Youth unemployment tends to go up pretty rapidly once a country goes into recession. So one can make a persuasive case for arguing that one of the best ways of keeping youth unemployment down is to have solid macroeconomic policies that help avoid recessions in the first place, or which mitigate the impact of recession when they do, as is inevitable, they do come along. And there's an argument about the minimum wage. Should there be a lower minimum wage for younger workers, for example below the age of 18 or 21? Is that a way of incentivizing businesses to take on more workers? Or if you cut the minimum wage, does that actually make things worse? In particular, younger workers need the money to be able to live and perhaps, for example, move away from home. And there's a danger, perhaps, that you trade off the incentive effect of the cheaper cost of employing workers against the fairness, the equity that young workers are taking a job and should be paid a fair rate for the work they do. Well, here are many options to help cut youth unemployment. The skill in an exam, of course, is to calibrate and evaluate and to think about which of these policies, maybe collectively or as a group of interventions, might be most effective. So this has been a topic video looking at some aspects of youth unemployment. It's a very important key issue in the labour markets of the UK, but many other countries around the world.